as long as you're there. So, we're on chapter 13 and part 8 of the series. And just let me know if you see Bridget jump in. This chapter is called Shell Games, and it starts off close to the Mexican border, southwest of Santa Fe. And it's talking about a smelter town, a town that was built around a smelting work that was once owned by Phelps Dodge Corporation. But in the late 1990s, Phelps Dodge closed the smelter, laid off a few workers, and in 2003 put the town up for sale. It was called Playas. He was selling the entire town, which included homes, school, a rodeo ring, a bowling alley, a shooting range, helicopter pads, and even its own zip code for $3.2 million. It was an isolated area, and nearly a third of the population fell below the poverty level. So, Phelps Dodge sold it for nearly $5 million. The official buyer was the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, or New Mexico Tech, as it was called. It was headquartered in a nearby town in New Mexico, but behind the scenes, the backers of the purchase was the then relatively new U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The remote location and even the poverty were hardly obstacles for the US government. In fact, they were assets, as the government's vision for Playas was to develop it into a counterterrorism training site. If such a transformation prevented Playas from turning into a ghost town and even supplied new jobs, that was just icing on the cake. The Playas Training and Research Center, as the new facility began being called, would offer coursework such as analysis of anarchist literature, but the main feature would be the realistic training facility by the layout of the town, which was surrounded by mountainous landscapes and desert. One section of it would become a community populated by 200 Afghan-born relocated to the United States, hired to help prepare American troops for encountering Afghanistan. A Santa Fe reporter described it as a combination of a realistic environment of the FBI's Hogan's Alley, a mock town in Quantico, Virginia, and a classroom strategy of the Western Hemisphere Institute of Security and Cooperation, formerly the School of Americas. The new Playas opened in 2004, and for the next 7 years, its client base consisted mostly of first responders and U.S. military personnel, like local cops. Then in March 2011, its clientele shifted to private military and security contractors training to replace U.S. military in Iraq and Afghanistan. New Mexico Tech, specifically the Playas Center, had become a subcontractor to Aegis Defense Services, LLC, their branch in Washington. Under Aegis's State Department Worldwide Protective Services contract. As a subcontractor, New Mexico Tech would receive approximately $27 million. For a private military and security company to have leased or purchased sites for training was not uncommon. The sites were, after all, moneymakers. In addition to training their own employees for whatever contracts they had, the companies had clients, often funded by other governments. They would use these facilities as weapons training, one-on-one combat, intelligence analysis products, Mexican border security, and more. Blackwater was the first to establish that on their 7,000-acre location in North Carolina. Blackwater claimed in its brochures and on its website that this was the largest military training facility in the country. In 2007, it opened another smaller facility on an 80-acre site west of Chicago, first called Blackwater North and then later renamed Impact Training Center. This one served law enforcement agencies throughout the Midwest, while the bigger facility was under contract to the Pentagon for intelligence analysis, specifically for NATO and, weirdly enough, the Afghan drug war, which we know wasn't a war to keep drugs out of the United States. It was a war to bring them into the United States. Out west, where land could be bought cheap, it was remote and plentiful. There were even more sites in Nevada, Arizona, 3 in California, 1 in Riverside, 1 in Imperial, and 1 in San Diego. The company that boasted the largest facility west of the Mississippi was SOC Inc., Special Operations Consulting, specifically Special Operations Consulting Security Management Group. Based in Nevada, SOC was founded by a former Navy SEAL in 2000, and like Aegis, was one of the winners of the Worldwide Protective Services contract for Matrix. On its website, it spelled its acronym as standing for Securing Our Country. That's a joke. And it described its property 2 hours north of Reno and close to the California border as 4,000 dedicated acres of varying terrain, several multi-purpose pneumatic and flat ranges, special purpose training munitions, simulator systems, state-of-the-art classrooms, and both field and facility accommodations. Despite the thousands of acres devoted to private military training, such sites were for the most part, were only known to people in the community and not America at large. Among the last things most Americans were thinking about in 2011 was the use of land in the United States to train private military contractors for security in Iraq. Private military contractors were as far from the minds of most Americans as they had been when the war began. After all, the war that had watered the mercenary seed and had expanded the crop of military companies worldwide was ending. Wouldn't companies like Blackwater also shut down? The new inhabitants of Playas knew better. On October 21st, 2011, Obama declared the Iraq war's end and announced a new day and self-reliant Iraq. Quote, I can report that, as promised, the rest of our troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year. After nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over. Over the next 2 months, our troops in Iraq, tens of thousands of them, will pack up their gear, board convoys, and journey home, unquote. But as U.S. soldiers packed their duffel bags, private contractors were en route to Iraq. Joining the thousands of private contractors already operating in Baghdad would be thousands more arriving by the beginning of the new year. Using private forces, as journalist Jeremy Seahill put it, was a backdoor way of continuing a substantial U.S. presence under the cover of diplomatic security. The official end of the war set into motion a political shell game. At an October 12th hearing of the House Committee on Oversight, Subcommittee on National Security, Homeland Defense, and Foreign Operations, Jason Chaffetz, a Utah Republican congressman, told his colleagues, when President Obama tells the American people the forces will be out of Iraq, I'm not sure the average American will understand that the forces will be replaced by private army of security contractors. Indeed, the plan was that after the withdrawal of American troops, the State Department effectively was taking over that role for the Pentagon, funding the contracts for as many as 8,000 private military security contractors to work within the walls of the largest embassy in the world, a 104-acre embassy on the Tigris River with its 21 buildings might even have to expand to accommodate this amount of private contractors. Roughly half of the State Department's diplomatic security budget in 2012 was slated for this single embassy. The number of personnel under the authority of the U.S. ambassador was set to increase from 8,000 to 16,000, half of which would be private military contractors. Some were contracted as armed guards protecting personnel leaving the embassy, including the staff responsible for the task of selling the $13 billion in arms used during the war. This is where they get all of just like in Afghanistan, this is the arms deals. And after every one of these, those arms flood the world. Others were hired to defuse explosives, and still others were part of armed response teams. Many would be performing quasi military functions, doing everything expected of a soldier except for going out on patrols to engage enemy. As an NPR reporter noted in May of 2011, the U.S. Army helicopters would be leaving Baghdad in December, but there will still be armed helicopters with pilots and machine gunners employed by DynCorp. What is clear from the current State Department plan for Iraq is the U.S. is going to have armed forces in the country for the foreseeable future. In addition to the embassy in Baghdad, the State Department would be running the Tactical Operations Center that deployed armed response teams and at least 5 military security posts called Enduring Present Posts at military bases throughout Iraq to support its private paramilitary force and to prepare for its new responsibilities. During the spring of 2010, the State Department asked Congress and the Pentagon for military equipment that included 24 Black Hawk helicopters and at least 50 special vehicles resistant to mines. Undersecretary of State Patrick Kennedy had explained in a letter to the Pentagon that there were items of equipment only available from the military and designated as necessary for what would be tasked as a magnitude and scale of complexity unprecedented in history of the State Department. Kennedy defined these jobs contracted to private military companies as not military functions. So you need military only equipment to do not military missions. But some members of Congress present at the October 12th hearing of the House were more concerned about the specific functions of the private military companies than the nomenclature or even the numbers. Whether the contractors were defined as security or military, they were still under contract to the State Department. As Representative John Tierney of Massachusetts said at the hearing, I understand the department will employ a number of contractors who will be responsible for rapid response to security situations, in addition to stationary security forces who will be responsible for protecting the embassy. These rapid response forces will be responsible for emergency response, including security for State Department employees in case of an attack. In my mind, this situation could almost certainly require the private security contractors to engage in combat. Jason Chaffetz chimed in and said, so as the Defense Department winds down, the State Department is ramping up. What could be more of a political shell game than the drawdown of forces? Now, notice, this is why I call it a kabuki dance. These guys are Republicans, and during Bush administration, it was only the Democrats that were complaining about private military contractors. Now Obama's in, so it will be the Republicans. These same bastards sat by and allowed Bush to blow this thing up. They just literally changed chairs. It's entirely a kabuki dance. For most Americans, the apparent end of the war implied the end of private military contractors as well. There had been no recent reports of any misconduct. The name Blackwater was no longer visible in the newspaper, but there were ongoing contracts in Iraq, and the soldiers coming home would potentially provide thousands of new recruits for the private military contractors. Whether it was in the aftermath of the 100 Years' War in the 14th century or the Cold War in the 20th, the end of wars and the homecoming of troops either spawned private military and security or bolstered existing ones. This time, the process was spurred by the White House Joining Forces Initiative, a program to help U.S. servicemen and women find jobs after returning home. Normally, a good cause for veterans, obviously, and just as good for the private military security contractors. DynCorp would soon add more than 7,000 veterans to its workforce. Long after the troops had returned home, the private security companies and the diplomatic personnel would be representing America in Iraq and the region. The importance of Iraq to the United States strategically, geopolitically, had not diminished, and the stability of Iraq's infrastructure was uncertain. Yet after troops withdrew, both the security and the image of the United States were entrusted to an industry that had no regulation and no accountability. A concerned members of Congress Commission on Wartime Contracting commented that the presence of such large firms as private contractors would increase the chances that people acting in the name of the U.S. can get the U.S. involved in perceptions of misconduct. The strategic importance of private contractors in the aftermath of the withdrawal showed that entrenchment of the industry. By 2011, the industry seemed to have become an integral part of the national security state, which consisted of the armed services, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the SecDef, the various intelligence agencies, the staff of the National Security Council, the State Department, and the FBI, and now it appeared they had a new partner, private security industry. The national security state was intended to serve the public, and yet, as a large, permanent, and ever expanding apparatus, it was highly secretive. While the expressed intention of such secrecy was to shield the truth from the American enemies, its actual purpose was to control the information provided to the American people, releasing only what a particular agency or administration is eager to make known, and withholding everything else. In place since the end of the Second World War, its objective changed in the aftermath of 9/11 when the U.S. began a policy of preventing war, undertaking campaigns against states opposing a potential that they said posed a potential threat, and targeting not only terrorists, but also states. In defining preventive war, historian author Schlesinger Jr. once said, quote, "If we don't act today, something horrible will happen tomorrow," unquote. While most Americans saw force as a last resort and war as something to avoid, the national security state shift to preventive war meant that for the United States, war had become a permanent condition. It also meant that unless the draft was reinstituted or the power elite in the national security state was willing to reveal what was needed to pursue such a policy and ask Congress for support, have to be a way to fill the gap, and that, of course, was private security. Thus, using the industry to secure both Baghdad and Kabul after the military withdrawal made perfect sense. And if the president did not reveal the role of private military and security in American foreign policy, that also was not surprising, as it was consistent with the secrecy of a national security state. In August 2011, after 3 years of studying federal contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Commission on Wartime Contracting issued a final report that sent a message of urgency. The 240-page study included assessments of contingency contracting with the State Department and USAID, as well as DoD. And the foreword began, quote, "Contractors represent more than half of the U.S. presence in the contingency operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, at times employing more than 250,000 people." It ended with a strident warning. Delay and denial are not good options. There will be a next contingency, whether the crisis takes the form of overseas hostilities or domestic response to a national security, like a massive terror attack or natural disaster. Reform will save lives and money and support U.S. interest. Reform is essential now. When David Eisenberg, the Beltway writer who persistently probed the industry, told his readers about the the report in his Huffington Post blog, he described the day of its release as the rubber hits the road day. For those following the saga of private military contractors, Eisenberg praised the hard work of the commissioners who had conducted numerous hearings and hundreds of interviews, had traveled to Iraq and Afghanistan, and had worked out of their offices in Baghdad and Kabul. Using the headline, War and Private Contractors, Can't Live With Them, Can't Live Without Them, he alluded to one of the most important sections of the report about the U.S. dependency on the industry. Quote, because the heavy reliance on contractors have overwhelmed the government's ability to conduct proper planning, management, and oversight of the contingency contracting function, the commission concludes that the government is over-reliant on contractors, unquote. For an uninformed reader, parts of the report must have seemed almost like fiction, for some of the facts defied previous assumptions. Other parts just didn't seem possible. For example, the category of spending called miscellaneous foreign contractors totaled $38 billion out of $206 billion spent on contracts since 2002. The commissioners could not determine what that category might have been used for or which companies benefited from it. Also, after a thorough analysis of spending, they calculated that from at least $31 billion to as much as $60 billion had been lost. Clearly, if one could bring back Willie Sutton from the dead, he would be a private contractor, not a bank robber. Of great concern, considering the shift from the Department of Defense to the State Department for the job of managing the U.S. presence in Iraq and Afghanistan after troop withdrawals, the commissioners claimed the State Department had not made necessary changes for good governance of private contractors it would soon have the authority over. In fact, the State Department had a shaky record of overseeing any armed security, they said in a statement that would later prove true. An earlier study had shown that many of the contractor abuse in Iraq for the first several years were caused by those working for the State Department, not the Pentagon. The commissioner stressed that this could result in significant additional waste and mission degradation. The report was very dark. It was bold. The commissioners unveiled one shocking detail after another. They even looked at private contractor casualties, a taboo topic, though close to the heart of the reason for America's dependence on private military contractors, because they don't want dead military and they don't give a crap about dead contractors. Between October 2001 and July 2011, there had been 2,429 contractor deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan, and 6,131 American military deaths. Now, supposedly, the contractors are not involved in armed-to-armed combat, but they had a third of the casualties compared to U.S. Military who was involved in hand-to-hand combat. And in the period from 2009 to 2011, contractors' deaths, including local and third country nationals, actually exceeded the military casualty rate. Again, from people who aren't supposed to be engaged in military operations. Private contractor casualties were never publicized. After troop withdrawal, the American public would not have any idea about the full human cost of American involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan. No matter where the U.S. sent private military to represent it, the footprint would be invisible to most Americans, largely because of the silent death of private warriors. The extensive use of contractors obscure the full human cost of war, the commissioners wrote. The full cost includes all casualties, regardless of status. In particular, significant contractor deaths and injuries had largely remained uncounted and unpublicized by anyone in the media and the U.S. government. They added that such casualties were undoubtedly higher than any reported number they could find. This was because the government's figures were based on insurance claims, and many foreign contractor employees from third parties may have been unaware of they even had an insurance capability of because they didn't speak English. Of equal concern to the commissioners was the issue of contractor outsourcing and subcontracting their work, recruiting increasingly from war torn nations with high levels of poverty and unemployment, like Namibia, Uganda, Mozambique, and Burundi, an issue that had been discussed in 2007. In an earlier report in 2010, the Commission had revealed an array of statistics regarding the nationalities of the private military contractor employees in Iraq and Afghanistan, including estimates from the South African Foreign Affairs Ministry showing 10,000 South African nationals. Mostly former police officers and soldiers were working in Iraq, being paid by the United States. Other countries supplying workers were Nepal, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Honduras, and our all-time favorite, the Philippines. At the Baghdad embassy, the final report noted roughly 75% of the private military personnel would be third world nationals. Triple Canopy, for example, the firm contracted to guard the diplomats, had often employed Uganda and Peruvians, according to a 2010 State Department audit of the country. And a significant portion of those employees had not been held to what the audit called English language proficiency. If the embassy, kind of like our truck drivers, if the embassy were to be attacked, the guards would be responsible for telling hundreds of English speaking occupants what to do, and they couldn't communicate. DynCorp and INRIS also hired workers from third world nations, especially Africa. In their recommendation for reforms, the commissioner suggested more rigorous vetting of subcontractors. They also called for improved coordination among agencies using private military in contingency operations, and they believed that the post of these civilian officials responsible for contingency contracting at DoD, state, and USAID should be elevated in the government. There should also be a permanent inspector general. Among the commissioner's numerous discoveries was the fact that out of hundreds of private military and security companies in many countries, only a small percent won the big governmental contracts, and they likened it to elitism in the financial services industry. Because the US government relied only on a handful of contractors to provide most of the support for contingencies, this reliance potentially represented a situation analogous to the US financial industry of too big to fail. The commission's conclusion was, however, not so surprising. Contractors, they wrote, will remain a significant element of the US total force because government agencies lacked organic capability to perform all necessary functions American foreign policy demanded. Well, then maybe we should change our foreign policy. The US government was, quote unquote, forced to treat contractors as the default option. No, we weren't. Change the foreign policy. Because of the innumerable flaws thus far in the public-private partnership, the need for reform is urgent. The last line of the report was, the nation's security demands nothing less than sweeping reform, unquote. Because of the commissioner's report and all that it revealed about the U.S. dependence on private military companies, because of the U.S. troop withdrawals and replacement role of the companies would play in Iraq, and because of the broadening market for private securities worldwide, beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, and even beyond war zones, 2011 would prove to be a banner year for the industry. It was the first year since 2004 that there was no shocking headlines drawing nationwide attention to private military contractors. It was the year that the UK and the US, in response to the work begun at Montreux, would cooperate with industry leaders to lay the groundwork for a self-regulatory authority, a new organization that would serve as a quote-unquote watchdog. And in a year when so many businesses were faltering in the ongoing worldwide economic struggle, it was a time of growth in the private military security companies. By some accounts, It grew at a rate of 15%. After all, economic troubles led to more instability and conflict. When the New Mexico Tech announced its big new contract with Aegis to use the Playa Center for private contractors to go to Iraq, the school's vice president of research and development, Dr. Van Romero, assured the public that the school was not getting into the business of training mercenaries. That's exactly what they were doing. He explained that the school's training focused on the ability to peacefully interact with people in their cultural environment. We have role players who are actually Afghanis. Yeah, the ones that the CIA trained to be terrorists. You're just hiding them out. Then, as if the trajectory of the rise of private military industry suddenly flashed before him, he moved on to the core issue. There's unrest in the world, Dr. Romero said, and that doesn't hurt us. If there's not a more callous statement from somebody that's supposedly an education official, I don't know what is. That's crazy. Okay. That's the chapter. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. That's just crazy. That's every time I pick this book up, I have to shake my head. But because of its importance to our conversation about Operation Gladio, I couldn't not use this book. Go ahead, SR. SR. Hello.
Sorry, Colonel.
That's okay.
Would it help if I click the mic before I start talking?
It does help.
Anyway, thank you all for attending today here in Spaces and on Rumble. I'm thinking about the contractors from third world countries, even or other nationalities. And we're talking about people that are being trained to be here. And I keep coming back to this thought. I don't know if everybody else remembers when they were talking about some of the, not riots, but wartime efforts that were going on in Africa and everything else, where they're taking kids, training them to be warriors and this, that, and the other. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of saying, I don't think that was the entire point. The entire point was to train them for operations like this.
Well,
it just blows my mind.
They actually were used to create instability in the countries where that was happening. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are no coincidences. That's the one thing we've learned for sure. Anybody else got anything? What'd you think about the show last night, SR? Have you seen it?
I'm sorry, Colonel. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I will watch it.
Okay.
I've seen the title, and I'm very interested in what's going
on. Let me bring Renee up. Renee, what you got?
Hey there. I just wanted to say yes. Watched the show yesterday. Amazing. I actually watched the Tucker show, and then you and Alpha, and it was a full-on day. Amazing stuff. So well done. My gosh. It's incredible, the connection, and I mean, just bravo to you for connecting those dots and exposing this. It's really incredible from all the terror experiences, tragedies, false flags, whatever you want to call them here in the United States. They're all connected, and that's, I mean, hello, Tulsi Gabbard, hello, everybody. I mean, did you alert? Wake up! United States government is completely in cahoots with all this. It's really shocking. My head is still spinning about it all.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. I gotta. Holy crap. So I had not, when I was reading the book, looked up this Dr. Van Romero. Let me tell you what the Gab AI says, what his expertise is. Detonation and shock physics, microblast effects. So he's a bomb guy. He's a guy that makes bombs. And he's the guy that they put in charge of that New Mexico tech place. No wonder he doesn't care about people. There's going to be unrest in the world, and that doesn't hurt us. No, but we hurt a lot of people creating the unrest. Holy crap. That's crazy.
I have another question, please, regarding the whole Oklahoma bombing incident. Did you come across, I mean, you've come across so much. I can't imagine how the Clintons, isn't this going to be an additional link of exposure to the Clintons? What did you find and uncovering and going down all these different pathways with the Clintons?
So there's been so much information out there about, and I don't have any proof that there were papers there. I know at the Murrah building, I know there's a lot of people that says there were. I've not come across anything that says there were. So I'm not saying there weren't. I just haven't come across anything that says there were. So I don't know whether there was or not. And yes, they're very intricately linked for a number of reasons. And I don't know if you got it, the real politic link that I mentioned in the show last night. That guy makes a lot of connections both with Clinton and Bush. The drug trafficking from the ports in Miami, the flying up from Latin America into Mena, Arkansas. Obviously, there's a lot of connections there. But I've done programs back, a couple of years ago about what was called Korea Gate and China Gate and the Riyadis and all of those people that swarm around the financial aspect of Clinton when he was governor. I've talked a lot about that. That you can't get away from the fact that while he was governor, they're trafficking drugs through airports in Arkansas. But I didn't touch on any of that in this. Because I didn't want to muddy the waters. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you just uncovered so incredibly much in every other direction. It's hard, to marinate in all of this right now because it's just so many different directions between the Philippines, everything connecting from J6 to Las Vegas, to this religious weird sect in Elohim City, and his connections, and it's overwhelming.
Well, and what's weird about that, Renee, is I really only when I go into one of these stories, a lot of the information is out there. I just look at it through what we have all collectively come to know as Operation Gladio and how that program works. And because now we all have such an extensive background, when you come out over story after story after story, and there's a Philippine link, and you come across stories, even stories that you came across 2 years ago, like in my case. I had not looked into the Las Vegas shooting and knew that had a Philippine connection until later. And so when you go back to stories, even though the ones you think you've done before, either there's more material out there to find, there's more declassification out there to find, um, or you have realized that there's another pattern that had not formed in your research yet, so that you're able to tie things together again. um, and I like doing them in a way where someone else has brought the subject up, which spurs me to go back, like Margaret Roberts being interviewed on Tucker, that makes me go back and look 2 years later at something I looked at and I thought I had a fairly good, and I found Strassmeyer back then. And I did link him to the German BND, their version of the CIA. I knew all that part, but I didn't, I know all of y'all didn't fully comprehend back then what you now know to be true. So I really wanted to drive that part home so that you can see the direct lineage of these people playing inside the United States, all having ties to known Gladio events. And you can't look at something like PatCon now with all of our information, even if you looked at it 5 years ago. You and Brian Cates and I were talking about that. That article that I reposted of his that he wrote in 2017 was before he met me and before he knew anything about Gladio. And so we both agreed when we left dinner that we need to go back and read. And I read it before the show last night. And he did an expert job of reporting some very nefarious things without knowing anything about Gladio. But when you look at that situation with your Gladio glasses on, it's completely different. And, even he said that, because it now makes so much more sense. The fact that they called it the order, and then you've got the new order over in Italy, which was responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in Italy associated with Operation Gladio, and they were involved in bank robberies. You just can't overlook those patterns now. SR-71.
Thank you, Colonel. And you do highlight a lot of the things and put them together in a way that we can all understand. But every time, I think part of the problem, from a public standpoint, seeing what's going on, is these events occur practically one after the other. And the way that I see this happening and what they're doing is in order to take your eye off of the ball of what happened before. And when you take your eye off of the ball of what happened before, which is still going on, but now you got this in the news and nobody's really paying attention to that anymore, you can't put the pieces together. And it just blows everybody's mind.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I focused my research just on this, because I think if I was just to kind of, I've seriously considered about doing like a short 30-minute kind of news thing, but frankly, I don't have time. I don't have time to gather the stuff, to do the research and put that out. I wish I did. And until this effort takes a life of its own and people are commonly talking about it, and are completely aware of it in the United States, then I can step back and kind of broaden out. But I just feel it's critically important that we all understand what has been done in our name. And that's why I'm laser focused on this. Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of the order and the new order, when I was kind of looking into the whole Miller Elohim City religious guy, and I started digging into the Mennonite because he and his father were previously Mennonites from Canada, and it's really fascinating because up in Ontario, in Canada, there was a really big enclave of kind of Amish and Mennonites, you know, kind of like we have in Ohio and Pennsylvania. But they, going back in the 1800s and some documents I found, these Mennonite groups had some sectors called order, the order and the new order as well. Which is really fascinating. And then on top of that, as I was reading the history of these Mennonites in Canada, I see words like Tavistock coming up and Blumenort and all these really like dot connecting pattern names of like German and British and stuff. And I'm not really familiar. I don't know about you all with Ontario. Ontario's like right smack dab above Buffalo, New York, all right, in the Great Lakes.
Yes,
and
right across the water.
Right across the water. And all their towns are named like British. There's Oxford and there's Blumenau. They're all like a combo of German and British names, but the Tavistock really threw me for a loop because I'm like, you're kidding me. There is a town across the water from Buffalo called Tavistock.
I noticed that on the map when we were up there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so I think that region, I mean, if you really step back with your Gladio glasses on now, even the railroads up there, the cargo, the connections of farming and the families right across the border and their shenanigans of operations, and the British, you know, because it's a commonwealth, it's becoming more obvious. I don't know about you if you feel that, but there's a lot of sneaky business.
That article that you found where it connects them to the Nazis in Latin America was just mind-boggling.
Yeah, when I discovered that, I almost couldn't believe it. My heart started pounding so fast. I'm like, how did I come across this? But it's like you said, when you have your Gladio glasses on,
you see things so differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Your stream. I was just streaming because I didn't have the time to read it slowly.
No, I read every word of it. It's amazing. Yeah. I don't know if we lost her. She kind of just faded out. Okay. All right. That's all I've got. Oh, there you are.
No,
now you're back.
No, I'm here. Can you even through one more thing? Article. Did you see in the portion above where it discusses Mengele?
Yes.
This Miller guy about their Minister of Public Safety.
Yes, I know.
There's
an Office of Public Safety in Canada.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so did we just follow along with that here? Whose was first? And, you know, and the guy kind of touches upon that topic that you've been talking about. So it really makes you question. That was a doozy of an article.
It was.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I was.
One more question before I go into another hole and lose you. How is your grandson's first birthday party? I don't know if he talked about it or not.
it was fabulous. And he was dropped off today. We have him all weekend for the first time. My daughter is at her husband's younger brother's wedding in Nashville. So we are grandparenting all weekend. So we are having a blast. SR71.
Did he get cake? I know you don't let.
Oh yeah, he got tons of cake. He had his own. So I didn't know there's a new thing. I haven't had a kid in 25 years, 28, 26, whatever it is, a long time. And there's a new thing called a smash cake. And at Publix, if you buy like a regular birthday cake, they will give you, for the first birthday only, they will give you a smash cake. And so he had his own little cake. It was like if you make a cake that's about 4 cupcake size big, one of their little specialty cakes, it's like that. And it's just his cake. And so we got a video of him. He had it all over his face. He had it all over both hands. And he still barely had gotten to the cake. And so he at that point, when he had it all over, he kind of got freaked out because he kept trying to get it off his hands and he couldn't get it off his hands. So luckily the place that we had it, which was a private community, had a huge kitchen, and we just took his clothes off, dumped them in the sink, and cleaned them up, and opened presents. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. Thank you for asking, Renee. SR71.
Thank you, Colonel. And I'm glad to hear you had a great time with your grandson and his birthday. One thing I can say, Renee, when you asked who came first, having followed the Colonel up to this point since I've been with him, there's always a testing ground before it goes anywhere else. So keep that in mind when you ask who came first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add. That's true. Just about everything that I've found them doing to us, they've done somewhere else first. And actually listening to that Tucker conversation, although I was taking notes because I wanted to talk to, I knew that would be, a subject that we could do on an alpha show. I wasn't planning on doing it last night. And I wasn't going to do it last night until she got, because I had not discovered that in my first research about the way that guy's body looked. That committed to me when I watched that show that we had to do it right away. That guy's body had all of the hallmarks of Operation of Public Safety, Dan Meterone torture. The excessive bruising on the feet. You guys went through that whole book with me. You know exactly what they do with the electrodes and cutting people. And you probably heard, if you've listened to the Tucker show, of the guard that came in to clean up the room said there was blood everywhere. That is exactly the scenes that we learned happen in the Office of Public Safety. So I have no doubt in my mind that whoever the people that visited him in that solitary confinement cell were trained by the same people that, and we know that's the CIA. They tortured that man the exact same way that we tortured people all over the world. And that was the kind of the linchpin for me, because I want the people out there that are working on this to realize what it's part of. And hopefully they will now. So anyway, no other hands. I'm going to go ahead and call it a day and get back to my grandson, and I will see you. So we're going to do the show with War Hamster tomorrow at noon, and then we will do the 4 o'clock. And I will see you guys tomorrow at noon. Oh, hey, have you eaten? Oh, Raz wants to know over on Rumble if I've eaten the cantaloupes. Okay, so I have to be honest. So I ate. Bridget sent me two. One was humongous, more like a muskmelon than a cantaloupe. That size, like ginormous. And I'm showing you. It was that big. Um, the smaller one I ate the day they came, the entire thing. The second one I cut into thirds, and I actually gave a third of it to my husband. And they never even made it in the refrigerator. Well, the 1/3 did. So I ate my third with my husband when he ate his third, and I put the other third in the refrigerator because Bridget said they were better cold. And I'm like, they're not going to make it until then. But I did wait a day and then I finished it. But my daughter brought my grandson over when I was eating the second half of the first one on the first day I got him. And he absolutely loved them too. He had never had cantaloupe and he absolutely loved it. So I am told, so just so you guys also know, next week I will be traveling. So I'm going to have another one of those crazy schedules for about another month. And I'm going up my second stop in this next trip, which I think we take off on Tuesday. My second stop is Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm going to get to meet Bridget for the first time. So I am totally psyched about that. So we'll do a few videos together during that time. So, okay, that's it. You guys have a nice evening, and I will see you back tomorrow at noon Eastern time. Take care. See ya.